In 2023, India officially surpassed China to become the country with the largest population on Earth. As is widely known, the population forms the foundation of a country and is the driving force behind economic, political, and cultural development. China was once the most populous country, while India is currently holding the position. Their massive population play a pivotal role in the development of these two countries. So, what is the historical development of the population of China and India? How did they become the most populous countries in the world? What experiences and lessons has China, which held the title of the world's most populous nation for at least 1,000 years, gleaned from its history concerning population issues? What beneficial insights can India learn from China? These are the topics I want to discuss in this episode. First, let's look at the population growth of China. China's population has consistently held a high percentage of the world total population, with the exception of the late Eastern Han Dynasty, during which China experienced a population decline, and the proportion may have been slightly below 10%. In other historical periods, China accounted for more than 20% of the world's population, usually around 30%. It is generally believed that the earliest reliable population statistics in China can be traced back to the 13th year of King Zhuang of Eastern Zhou. According to the population census at that time, China had 11,847,000 people. From the Zhou dynasty to the end of spring and autumn period, China's population remained between 10 million and 13 million. During the late Warring States period, there was a significant population growth, with an estimated national population of about 30 million. In the Battle of Changping during the late Warring States period, the Qin and Zhao states mobilized a total of 1 million troops and logistic personnel. To defeat the Chu state, the Qin state deployed more than 600,000 soldiers. After the unification of Han Dynasty, the population experienced a new development. According to the Book of Later Han, the official record of history of the Han Dynasty, in the second year of the Emperor Ping of the Western Han Dynasty, the national population had reached 59 million. From the Western Han Dynasty to the early Ming Dynasty, China's population fluctuated from 50 million to 100 million. By the end of Ming Dynasty, the national population exceeded 100 million. It is estimated that the population was between 160 million and 175 million in the late Ming Dynasty. During the Qing Dynasty, the Chinese population reached 143,171,559 in the sixth year of Emperor Qianlong. This was the first time that official records mentioned a population figure with 9 digits. By the 27th year of Qianlong, the population had reached 200,472,461, surpassing 200 million for the first time. By the 55th year of Qianlong, the population had reached 301,487,115, surpassing 300 million for the first time. In just 50 years, China's population increased by 160 million. Under Emperor Daoguang, ancient China reached its peak population. In the 14th year of Emperor Daoguang, the Chinese population surpassed 400 million for the first time. According to the record of Emperor Xuanzong of the Qing Dynasty, the total population that year was 401,008,574. The population reached its highest point during the first year of Emperor Xianfeng, when it reached 430 million, the highest level ever recorded in human history. During the Guangxu era, the phrase 40,000 myriad became a common expression to describe China's population resources, and this continued until before 1949. There are 2 fundamental factors influencing China's population development: agricultural technology and politics. Limited by agricultural technology, the population ceiling in China before the Qing Dynasty was 200 million. However, this limit was broken in the 18th to 19th century when China's population reached its peak of 400 million. This was due to the introduction of maize, potatoes, and sweet potatoes from South America. Take potatoes as an example. With its high species diversity and genetic variability, potatoes became the most adaptable, stable crop in the high-altitude mountainous area, where maize and sweet potatoes couldn't thrive. Potatoes took on the responsibility of providing food. Normally, planting an acre of wheat requires 250 to 300 cubic meters of water. While this amount of water is enough for the growth of 2 acres of potatoes, on average, a yield of over 1,000 kilograms per acre for a staple crop is considered remarkable, but the yield of 1 acre of potatoes can easily reach 3,000 kilograms. Therefore, potatoes became a core food crop in many regions, which was expected. Second, politics plays a major role in population growth. In the early and middle periods of each dynasty, political stability led to a significant increase in population. However, this population growth brought about serious conflicts between the population and land resources, accelerating political decay. The decay and decline in politics further led to wars, causing a sharp drop in population. As can be seen from the historical population distribution of China, the country's population trend over the past 2,000 years display a characteristic of drastic ups and downs. The fundamental reason behind this is the contradiction between population and land. The famous British economist Thomas Malthus summarized this contradiction as the Malthusian trap. The so-called Malthusian trap posits that population growth follows a geometric progression, while survival resources only increase arithmetically. The surplus population will always have to be eliminated in some way, as the population cannot exceed the corresponding level of agricultural development. This population pattern was once again repeated during the Qing dynasty. On one hand, the introduction of sweet potatoes provided a base for food supply. On the other hand, the government adopted a policy of 摊丁入亩, that is, no longer collecting poll tax but taxing according to the number of acres of land. So landowners with more land paid more taxes, while landless peasants didn't pay taxes. This policy greatly promoted population growth, and China's population reached a peak 430 million in 1851. However, after the population peaked, the Qing dynasty immediately faced a severe political crisis. The most significant event was the rebellion of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. The main participants in the Taiping Rebellion were landless farmers. These peasants, losing their land, which was essential for them to survive, could no longer sustain their lives. They had no choice but to take part in small-scale resistance against landlord oppression. When these resistance were led by intellectuals with combat experience, this small-scale rebellion evolved into massive movement of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. The Taiping Heavenly Kingdom started in 1851, lasted for about 15 years. It resulted in war and turmoil, leading to at least 60 million deaths. In other words, population and politics are interconnected. A large population is a result of political instability, but it can also lead to political decay. Therefore, how to handle the pressure brought by the massive population is key in determining whether a country can achieve sustained development. After the establishment of PRC, the development of China's population continued to follow historical patterns. On one hand, political stability promoted population growth, rising rapidly from 400 million at the founding time, which is 1949, to 1 billion in the 1980s. On the other hand, an excessive population exerted tremendous pressure on the political system. For instance, the vast population posed a significant burden on food production. In the early 1960s, China blindly pursued high-yield agricultural policies, resulting in severe food shortage and causing a famine for millions of people. Furthermore, beginning in the 1960s, the number of young people in cities saw a rapid increase, leading to severe employment pressure. As a response, the Chinese government launched a up to the mountains and down to the countryside movement, transferring surplus labor from cities to rural areas to alleviate growing urban employment pressure. A total of approximately 17 million urban youths were relocated from the city to live in rural areas. In the early 1980s, to control surging population growth, the Chinese government implemented a stringent one-child policy. Although widely criticized, it was an essential measure taken to cope with serious population pressure in the context of that time. In the 1990s, the Chinese government seized the opportunity to integrate into the global economy. On one side, It supplied industrial goods to Western markets using a large number of cheap labor. On the other hand, it made massive domestic investment to achieve rapid industrialization. Through these measures, the Chinese government successfully transformed its population from a burden to a driving force for national development. Nowadays, China has completed its industrialization process, with only 32% of the population engaged in agriculture. 70% of the population no longer depends on land for survival, which indicates China has escaped the Malthusian trap. This is the greatest achievement China has ever made over the last century. Today's China is thoroughly industrialized and firmly stands on the basis of industrialization. Upon this solid foundation, China can not only compete with advanced industrial countries like Germany and Japan, but also continue to advance and elevate the level of industrialization and push it towards industrial intelligence and industrial informatization. At present, China's population size is decreasing. People have different views on this, but from the perspective of China's current industrial development level, a shrinking population is not a serious problem. This is because China's industry is transitioning from labor-intensive to technology-intensive. In 2023, technological-intensive products such as machinery and electronic equipment accounted for over 50% of China's exported industrial goods, especially in automobile exports. China surpassed Japan in the first half of this year to become the world's largest exporter of automobile. Traditional labor-intensive products such as clothing and toy no longer make up the majority of China's exports. I will elaborate on this aspect in another episode. In short, China's industrial development has transcended the stage of solely relying on cheap labor. It increasingly depends on scientific and technological proficiency and efficiency, high-quality manufacturing capabilities. At this stage, a moderate population decline does not pose a substantial threat to the country. Then let's turn to the population growth of India. In 1800, the population of the region of present-day India was estimated to be approximately 169 million. The population would grow gradually throughout the 19th century. The first proper census was conducted by the British in 1871, documenting around 238 million people. Despite recurrent famines, India's population continued to grow, reaching about 319 million by 1941. This growth was due to improvement in sanitation and health services. The population of India would see its largest rate of growth in the years following the country's independence from the British Empire in 1948, where the population would rise from 358 million to over 1 billion by the turn of the century, making India the second country to pass the billion-person milestone. While the rate of growth has slowed somewhat as India begins a demographic shift, the country's population has continued to grow dramatically throughout the 21st century and finally made it the most populated country on Earth in the year 2023. Looking at India from China's experience, we can see that India is undergoing a similar population development pattern. On one hand, political stability since independence has created conducive conditions for population growth, while modern agricultural technology has ensured food production on the other hand. These two factors led India's population to grow from 300 million at its independence to the current 1.4 billion. However, a large population size is both an advantage and a disadvantage. The massive population size poses pressure on politics. Among the current population of India, 70% are still peasants, dependent on the land for basic survival. This suggests that India's development is still constrained by the contradiction between population and land. So, what consequences will the conflict between land and population bring to India's political development? I used to work in Africa for several years, where I witnessed the consequences of rapid population growth conflicting with land resources. The unemployment rate among African youth is very high, with numerous young people falling into poverty. Secondly, poverty is the best breeding ground for terrorist and terrorist ideology. In recent years, the number of terrorism incidents in Africa is rising due to the widespread dissemination of extremist and terrorist ideologies among African youth. Sub-Saharan Africa recorded the largest increase in terrorism deaths, rising by 8%. 60%, or 4,023, of all terrorism deaths globally occurred in Sub-Saharan Africa. 4 of the 10 countries with largest deterioration in GTI score are located in Sub-Saharan Africa. Africa vividly manifests the consequences of a country's falling into the Malthusian trap. To some extent, India resembles a downsized version of Africa. For instance, the central government of India's decrees cannot be well executed in each state, and there are many obstacles in the connection of personnel and materials among states. India has a multitude of ethnic groups and languages. While this demonstrates India's diversity, it also obstructs and interferes with the government's management of the vast population. Therefore, India's massive population scale brings opportunity as well as serious challenges to India. It could even be said that the challenges outweigh the opportunities. To better cope with these challenges, India must fully absorb and learn from the experiences and lessons of other countries around the world, especially its largest northern neighbor. Being blind optimism and believing that being the most populous country in the world will inevitably lead India on a path of rapid development can pose severe risks for India's future growth. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.